Hey, what's up, Brew Crew, and welcome back to The Sixer, my series of short list videos. This week, I'm going to be talking about my 6 favorite card games. I grew up playing a lot of card games as a kid, mostly traditional card games like poker, blackjack, rummy. We especially played a lot of euchre growing up in the Midwest. That was always being played during social gatherings where I grew up. So I've always enjoyed playing games that feature cards. There's something very satisfying about holding a hand of cards. Now, before I get into the list, I do have a couple of things that I want to clarify. Number one is that I don't tend to play a lot of CCGs. So you won't see things like Magic or Flesh and Blood on the list. Second, these are all games that, in my opinion, are card games. They may have some other components, but if the game is driven mainly by playing cards and the cards are the major focus of the game, then I considered it for this list. I felt like I needed to clarify that with a disclaimer because I think there's a lot of differing opinions on what is considered a card game. So, again, these are card games in my opinion. All right, now that all that fun stuff is out of the way, let's get started with my number 6. My number 6 is a very new to me game, but I think it's really clever, and that's Photograph, or Wind the Film if you have the original version. This game is a great challenge because after you pick up cards to put into your hand, you're only allowed to change the position of one card. Then you have to lay down as many cards as you picked up. You're trying to collect sets of cards of the same color, placed down in either ascending or descending order, and the cards can't be more than 3 numbers away from the last number in a row. There's a surprising amount of forethought needed to plan ahead so that you can take and play exactly what you need to score. So that's my number 6, Photograph. Number 5 is a game with a pretty dark theme, and that's The Bloody Inn. You are playing as an innkeeper, and in order to make more money, you've decided to kill some of your guests and steal their money. If you've watched my last Sixer where I talked about my favorite game mechanisms, then you'll know that I love multi-use cards. In The Bloody Inn, your cards act as your victims, your accomplices, and locations to hide the bodies. You also have to spend cards from your hand to pay to play cards, which is another mechanism that really turns up the tension. I think my favorite thing about this game, though, is the way that it handles money. Players are only allowed to keep up to $40 in liquid cash. If they would gain more than that, anything over that amount is wasted. Since the player with the most money wins, you need to take an action to launder your money, trading it in for checks that can't be spent, but can be turned back into liquid cash in a pinch. But trying to time that just right to get that big payout without losing any of it is a great puzzle. So that's my number 5, The Bloody Inn. My number 4 is the first of 2 trick-taking games on my list, and the first one is Cat in the Box. Like I said, I grew up playing a lot of euchre, and trick-taking games were always popular at family gatherings. Cat in the Box is a trick-taking game with a really clever twist. Like in most trick-taking games, a player will lead a card, and then all other players follow suit. The trick with Cat in the Box is that you decide what suit a card is when you play it. You'll make that choice by placing a token onto a board which shows 4 colors with numbers 1 through 9. So not only are you trying to win a certain number of tricks, but you're also trying to score bonus points for grouping your tokens on the board together. The other neat thing about this game is that the trick-taking phase ends immediately if a paradox occurs. This means that you are unable to place a token to play one of your cards because all of the numbers in your hand are already spoken for. If you've caused a paradox, you'll lose a point per trick that you've won rather than gaining them. Plus, you'll lose out on any of the bonus scoring. It's a really interesting trick-taking game that has a lot of potential to melt my brain a little bit, and that's why I really like Cat in the Box. Number 3 is my second trick-taking game, and that's The Crew Mission Deep Sea. We played quite a bit of the original Crew, and I love them both, but I love what they changed in the follow-up version. Using the new cards to randomize the requirements adds a ton of variability to an already fantastic cooperative trick-taking game. Now, if you're not already familiar with the Crew, you and the other players will be working together to make sure that you meet all of the requirements to succeed during a scenario. For example, it may be as simple as saying that a certain person must win a certain card in a trick during that round. As the game goes on, though, it gets tougher and tougher as more requirements are added. It's a very fun game, but I'll admit that it does stress me out a little bit because I'm so worried about letting down my teammates. But I still have a lot of fun with it, so that's my number 3 card game, The Crew Mission Deep Sea. Number 2 is a classic at this point, and that's San Juan. San Juan is essentially the card game version of Puerto Rico, and it has a lot in common with Race for the Galaxy. Now, I do really enjoy Race for the Galaxy, but because of the teach and because of the complexity of the icons, San Juan just tends to hit the table more often, and so it ranks higher on my list. This is another game where your hand of cards may represent multiple different things. They're your resources, your money, and your buildings. Just like in Puerto Rico, players will select a role which triggers a certain action that round. All players will get to take the action, but the player that selected it gets an additional benefit. You're going to be gaining points by building buildings, and once a player has 12 buildings, that ends the game, and the player with the most points wins. You need to build buildings that generate resources that can be spent to build more buildings, and on until the game ends. It's a really smooth game that has been around for quite a while at this point, and I still really love it. That's San Juan. Finally, my number 1 card game is Res Arcana. Res Arcana on the surface doesn't look much different than a lot of other engine building card games. You'll be spending resources to play cards, to generate more resources, and on until you can play the cards or control the locations that will give you points. At the end of the game, when someone has at least 10 points at the end of a round, then the player with the most points wins. The really cool hook with Res Arcana, though, is that you will only ever have a very limited number of cards during the game. And so the puzzle becomes, how do I make these cards work together? This was definitely a slow burn game for me. I had a pretty middle of the road feeling about it after the first time I played it. But it's a game that the more I played, the more I really started to love and appreciate what it did. That restriction of how many cards you actually have available to you is really what solidified it for me as my favorite card game. So there you have it, everyone. Those are my 6 favorite card games. In the comments below, let me know what you think of these games, and let me know what your favorite card games are. And until next time, let's get another round for the table.